just to remind you to start fasting or starting fasting if you want to keep the energy down. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, God. And the Lord bestow upon us His grace, His mercy, His blessing, and His wisdom, both now and from age to ages. Amen. I'll promise to be very brief this time, because I know we have a jam-packed evening, and we've already gone through three very hefty lectures, and I think most of the content of this was summarized in the video and in the previous lecture, so I'll be quick. Okay, I only have like, I don't know, 15 points? No, just kidding. Just to check if you're awake. 5 points, okay? 20 slides. Each slide hopefully about 1 minute. Okay, just don't time me. Okay, so one thing that we were mentioning last, or in the beginning, about some of the failed leaders. Some leaders do very well at their job, but once they leave, or once something happens, and they can't continue, or they get distracted, or whatnot, or they die, sometimes, or the one who is not a great leader will not plan for the future. And planning for the future means forming disciples to lead. As we mentioned before in the example of the Prophet Samuel, he was a great leader and a great servant. And as it says in the book of Samuel, then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, "Look, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations." So Samuel was expecting, as Abuna John had said, the organization that God had set up for leadership to continue in terms of the prophet. But the sons, the disciple, which is the best type of discipleship, failed to succeed in following the leadership. So that's one reason why they asked for a king. Maybe it was an excuse for these people, but nevertheless, that's what happened. And so this is the test of the exceptional leader. Let's say when you become successful after following Abuna's direction, then what happens? Like, for example, look at what happened to Steve Jobs. Yes, he departed early, but can we say, I know we keep mentioning this as an example, but can we say, is there still good leadership now in that company? Maybe time will tell, but probably not. Let's say, okay, let's use a sports example. Sometimes say, oh, this person is the best individual, but, or like let's say Kobe Bryant, is he a good leader? He's a good player, but let's say he breaks an ankle, or he's out for a game or something. What happens? Well, for the number one thing is that they don't score as many points, right? So what happens when the leader's not there physically? Does the company continue to succeed and thrive? Maybe for an unplanned game, that's fine, or I'm in an unplanned circumstance, that's okay. But if we all know we're going to die, so what's going to happen after? The leader with a good vision doesn't just have a vision for his life, but for the future, for at least what happens to come, or what will happen immediately after he is unable to continue his service. Another example, like some people will say in the church, oh, this is a great deacon, have him lead. Okay, then what? What if he doesn't come on Sunday? A saintly priest, for example, who passes away, we have many of them, and we follow them in everything. And sometimes we'll say, well, what will happen to the service after they leave? Well, one person is a great saint. We can't survive after he departs. we survived very well because he was a good leader. What will happen to the church? We will survive because he was a great leader. So the leader has a vision beyond his time. And he is thinking what will happen after me for the sake of the people that he serves. The father does the same thing. The businessman does the same thing. Okay. One time, just because this is the time. One time they were interviewing one of the voters who had voted just recently, and they were asking them. Abuna told me the story. I didn't see this, but he said, "How did you vote?" He said, "I voted according to discipleship." What do you mean? Well, I don't know many of the figures very well. I've heard of them, but I know them by, in the sense he's saying, I know them by their fruits, or by who they discipled from, who they were disciples of. So, Abuna Rafael Avamina, I know he's a disciple of Pope Carlos. Pope Carlos was the same. Amba Rafael, he has a good reputation, but he was a disciple of Amba Musa, who has an even longer reputation. Amba Tawadros, we've seen what His Eminence Metropolitan Bechomyos has done in these last few months, and it was exceptional. We need a leader like this. So he was saying, this is how I do it. Just like the Lord said, you'll know them by their fruits. You will know the leader by his fruits or her fruits as well. So sometimes the fruits of leadership doesn't come to our eyes until after they depart. Like many of the lives of the saints, we didn't realize they were saints until the miracles happened after, or people would come. Like even with Pope Carlos, we knew a lot of his miracles, but even more miracles, stories came to us after he departed. Same thing now, we're having many stories with Pope Shinoda as well. So this is the fruit of the visionary leader. St. Paul says to his disciple, St. Timothy, it's very easy to remember, 2 Tim 2:2, or 2 Timothy 2:2. Okay? And the things that you heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. So here is the concept of passing on the baton from one generation to the next. Okay? This takes time. Things that you heard from me, to commit to faithful men who will be able to teach others this. Okay? So, we're like almost halfway done. Okay? 5 main points: the selection, the delegation, the communication, the encouragement, and the evaluation. Okay? Before you have disciples, they are not chosen for you, you choose them. Okay? So they're selected. How you select people is more important than how you manage them. Once they're doing the job, for the manager, for the person who has responsibility. And there's many examples in the Bible of this. For example, in the book of Samuel, so-and-so was Joab, was over the army, Jehoshaphat was 40 reporters at it. So everyone had their responsibility. And there has to be at least an internal selection process that the leader does in deciding who does what and who goes where and who will I ask to take this responsibility and so forth. And so each one of you, depending on your leadership position right now, must think, who do I want to be my disciple? Of course, this is in the most humble way. But the greater the responsibility, the greater the leadership, the more focused the person has to be on thinking about this as early as possible. So, what type of person do you want? You just want the yes man who just says, yes, everything you say, I'll do. That's good to a certain extent, but it's not always the best type. It's the best type of servant, but not necessarily the best type of leader. Right? Understand what I mean by that? Do you want the person who's a workaholic? Just do everything? Of course, the leader has to be a good worker. But if all they're doing is work, and they're not even understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it, what's to come in the future, they won't be a good leader. The one who has many talents? Yes, the one who has many talents should be something that you should consider. Not necessarily even the same talents as you have. So when you train them, you have to keep in mind what their talents are to help them foster their abilities. Does that make sense? And use your experience to help them. Just like a servant in Sunday school, you talk about certain virtues or you give a certain lesson, but we need to also think about the kids that we're speaking to, because each one of them has different circumstances, different talents, different objectives that we need. Okay, so a lot of times we ask this question, where do you see yourself in so many years? Right? It's important to think, like when I was talking about vision. Have you ever thought regarding discipleship? You ask yourself, well, where do I see my disciple in so many years? That's a question that we need to ask. So, is there does anyone know the difference between the disciple and apostle? Anyone? If you noticed in Asheo praying the doxology, it made it a little clearer. Sometimes we always say 12 disciples, 70 apostles. But actually, I think it's more technically accurate to call them either both apostles or to focus on the 12 as apostles and maybe consider the 70 with... Yes?
I never looked it up, but I from the way the Bible talks about both disciples and apostles, I think disciples were more of the Chinese or the traditional martial arts thing. Like it's a personal student that lives with the teacher for a long time to really know how he lives, not just the teachings. Versus apostle.
Yes, it's part of it. That's what we consider now when we speak of the 12. That's why. If you use that definition, that's why we focus when you say 12 disciples. But, okay, let's talk first about what the term apostle might mean. Anyone know? Those who were sent out. Okay? The 12 were sent out, the 70 were sent out. But as it says here, he sent them out to where he himself was about to go, as the gospel says. And so, not all the disciples disciples just means follower. Okay? So, and in the gospel, when it talks about disciples, it talks about the 12, talks about 70, but more importantly, it talks about everyone else who followed him, became Christian. So we're all considered disciples, but not all, and we're actually all apostles, but not at the same level by any extent, to which we designate the 12 and the 70. So, in the church, we come to be disciples. We sit and we learn and we grow, and then we're apostles. We're sent out to serve. Okay, but if you look at the amount of time and effort and discipleship that the Lord gave to all the people, he had different, I guess you can consider it, spheres of influence. So we had people who he couldn't reach no matter how much he tried to serve them. People who followed him, people whom he entrusted with a very important service, like the 70, the 12 whom he kept at his close side for years, and then even among the 12, he had 3 whom he brought next to him in certain circumstances, like the transfiguration, that he didn't allow the whole 12 to go. So, in our spheres of influence or service or discipleship, there's those we can't control or influence. There's those that we have some level of influence upon, and then there's some where we have some control in the positive way, not in the negative, of course. And the amount of time that we spend with those whom we have a strong influence over, of course positive I'm talking about, should be the people who are closest to us most of the time. Does that make sense? So sometimes when I manage my time and how much time I give to each person, it should reflect this to some extent, because that's the model that the Lord gave us. Okay, and that's why usually you see, like for example, when His Holiness the Pope would ordain a bishop, he wouldn't just bring him from the middle of nowhere and then ordain him. What would he do? Anyone know? For ordaining, the priest usually comes and asks the congregation, and he sits with them if he had time, and he would investigate. But for the bishop, it's a little different. He would bring them either as a secretary or close to his side, or in the papal residence, and they would stay for him for a considerable amount of time before, usually, especially when he was in his healthier days, sometimes many years before ordaining them as bishop. And not all of them would be ordained. Sometimes, I don't know the details, but like let's say you're trying to disciple someone, they're just not learning, or they're not following, or they have a certain mind that is going a completely different way that's not in line with the church. You might send them back to another service, or keep them, as a monk or a priest. So that's why we say, when we select we select only the best, and the Lord only select the best in terms of their potential, and your potential to guide them to a certain extent. Okay, and the best leaders, 99 times out of 100, were the best followers to some extent. Okay, just like I will speed up the process. We're halfway now. Okay, the second point is delegation. The best leaders, again, work hard. Sometimes they work too hard. And they don't know how to delegate. So they're not the best leaders. Okay? Leaders work hard without burning themselves out. As the book of Ecclesiastes tells us, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their labor. And a 3-fold cord is not quickly broken. So the more the team, the greater the team that is working well, the more the work that is accomplished in the present and in the future. Okay? One reason, not the only, but one reason why the Lord sent them out 2 by 2. And this happened in the story of Moses. As many of you know, in the book of Exodus, chapter 18, Moses' father-in-law comes to investigate how he's doing in the service. And he saw Moses sitting down, the people coming with all their problems, kind of like we have today with the church. And he's like, what's going on here? Basically, he said, what is it that you're doing for the people? Why do you won't sit and all the people stand before you from morning until evening? You're working all day, and all the people are coming. And Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come to me to inquire of God. It's my job. When they have a difficulty, they come to me, and I judge between one another, and I make known the statutes of God and His laws. So Moses' father-in-law said to him, the thing that you do is not good. Can you believe that? Like Moses, the arch prophet, called by God directly. Then his father-in-law comes and says, you're not doing a good job here. Why? He could have said, excuse me, God told me to do this. No, he said, both you and these people who are with you will surely wear yourselves out. You're going to burn out, they're going to burn out. For this thing is too much for you. You are not able to perform it by yourself. So what's the solution? He didn't just criticize and leave. He was a good leader. He taught him from his wisdom, even though he was not called to be a prophet. So this is what he said. Again, we only have a few more moments. Okay, he said, listen now to my voice, I will give you counsel, and God be with you. Stand before God, before the people, so that you may bring the difficulties to God, and you shall teach them the statutes and the laws, and show them the way. Again, this is what we were talking about in the lectures before. in which they must walk, and the work they must do. Moreover, you shall select from all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness. So again, choose men of character. So here's the selection process. You're not alone. And place such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. So he is setting the structure of the organization. Again, it's about 2 million people or so. We'll skip the rest. And then after that, there's like what we call like an ordination process. That the Lord takes this, summarized here, the Lord takes of the spirit of Moses and gives at least to the 70 here. The same spirit. So how do you apply that in the household or in the business? Of course, I'm not talking about ordination. So how do we apply this? Have the same vision? Okay. Yes. What else? What do we mean by spirit here? How can we transfer the spirit to others that we have? We have to be with them. We have to sit with them. We have to teach them. We have to encourage them, support. Like we have to be with them a lot in order to transfer the spirit. It's not just transferring information. Okay. This is why, like, we use the term discipleship, not just mentorship. Of course, that's what the world uses. It's a good term, but it doesn't do the term enough. It doesn't do the service or the act enough justice. Like service is a lot better, or discipleship, is a lot better term than mentorship. So there has to be some sort of delegation. And let's say there's no one under you, so maybe you should search out and look for people. If you do have an important service, you want to enlist others in your vision, and you have to kind of initiate this process. Okay, even if there might not be one to begin with, a structure like this to begin with. Okay, the third aspect is communication. Your team must be given specific instructions. Repeat it, kind of like we mentioned before. Don't give them too much information or too little information. Okay? It has to be clear and concise, not verbose. You have to be accessible, but with the proper limits. Not completely accessible that you can't do anything, and completely inaccessible that they won't have any guidance. Okay? As one of the authors mentioned, from listening comes wisdom. From speaking comes repentance. I was surprised at this book because this was not even a Christian book. One of the stories of Abdelsayed's Desert Fathers, they said he was so humble he wouldn't give instructions to those who came, who wanted to be his disciples. And the other Desert Fathers criticized him for not giving any guidance. So like, why are you doing this? Give them help. And he responded by saying this, I'm neither a leader nor a teacher, but if that young man wishes to learn something, if there's anything that I can teach him, let him look at how I behave, how I act, and let him do likewise, without my having to instruct him. So one of the first steps in discipleship is to follow him. So if that's one way that you can recognize who might be a good disciple, not that they're just imitating you, but they're enlisted in your vision. They're seeing what you're doing, and that there's a reason or a process or a meaning behind it, and they agree with it, so they're following along to a certain extent. Okay? Just like St. Paul said in Philippians, we skipped the Hebrews verse, brethren, join in following my example, and note those who so on as you have us as a pattern. I'm not sure if you're going to tell us. I think this term pattern, like we say in the Tasbihah, is from type or typos, like a symbol, for example, like when God asked Moses to make the tabernacle. So kind of like a mold. So you're like the mold of the person who's going to disciple. Not it's going to be completely, exactly the same thing, but there's a form to which they use as a model to grow into, and even past. Okay? So, for example, sometimes you ask people to do something, if you're in a position of authority, and like, I told them to do so and so. Well, how did you tell them? Well, I just told them verbally, once do this. And I told them, do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, but did you follow up with them? No, I just told them they should know. I'm in charge. Did you repeat more than once? Maybe it was too much for them to comprehend. Did you explain why you were doing this? Did you explain how exactly you wanted it to be done? Did you interact with them? Did you give them opportunities to ask you any questions? Were you available to them? Did you give them time to learn exactly what you were asking of them? Did you show them? So this is what the leader is. Okay? As St. Paul says, the things which you learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do. Again, you learned and received and heard and saw in me. These do. And the God of peace will. So St. Paul is saying, I give you many ways to teach you how to be the model through this discipleship. Just do. And the God of peace be with you. And this is actually very closely connected to the concept of tradition, the holy tradition in the church. We don't have time to go into it, but the way the holy tradition is passed on from generation to generation is the same way that leaders pass on the concept of leadership and service from generation to generation. In the same way, the concept of living the true Christian life that we pass on from generation, family to family to family. Okay? Just like running the race. Second to last point is encouragement. We don't just tell them what to do and how to do it, but we have to give them encouragement. Like St. Barnabas did to St. Saul, the son of St. Barnabas named himself as the son of encouragement. To comfort the faint heart, to uphold the weak, to be patient with all. I'll go more quickly because we're getting more time. I don't know if it's a good idea next time to put the lecture immediately after that. Okay. Yes, we did have Ashaya, but some people. Who did the homework this time? Who did the quiet time? We probably have. See. Okay. Did anyone? Did anyone do the one or some of the three verses that three passages that we gave? Okay. Which one of the three passages do you think applies most to the concept of encouragement? Which one? Huh? Joshua. Why? Very good. Yes, we're not going to read this all, but just look at the underlying parts and see how much. This is God speaking to Joshua. Okay? Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon you, I have given you. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, I will be with you. So just like Moses was successful, you will be successful. Why? Because you're a good follower and you will be a good leader. I will not leave you nor forsake you. He was successful because he was with me. You will be with me and you will be successful. Be strong and of good courage. 1, 2, 3. I think he says it 4 times. I don't know if I find 3. Maybe I cut it off. But God is telling him many times, be strong and very courageous or of good courage. And this happens, this is what we were talking about in other lectures, so we won't stress it out too much. So who's the real leader here? Moses? Joshua? God. Right? So when we lead the same way that God led him, but from the power that God gives us. So we have to feel this from God first. The real encouragement, if you've ever experienced this, and I'm sure you have, from our spiritual leaders, whether they be fathers of confession or servants or parents, we feel the real spiritual and leadership through encouragement. And if you experience it, and sometimes many times you feel it also from God Himself when you read the Holy Bible, like we ask you to in the quiet time. So when we read this, I get very encouraged, and I feel God's talking to me. So if you need encouragement, read this passage. There's many passages like it too, but this is one of my personal favorites. And this will teach you how to encourage others. Like if you feel encouraged, you're going to want to encourage others too, to share the joy of being uplifted. Okay? So we try at most to do the opposite of what, I don't know if this is the same pattern, but when I was applying for colleges many years ago, we applied to many colleges, and we noticed that one actually had pointed it out. When we got the responses back, of course, you could usually, at that time, you could tell very easily if you got accepted or not just by the sizes. But when you start reading the letter, a very interesting point, I don't know if they still do it now, but usually they say, if you get accepted, they start out by saying something like, I'm very pleased to inform you, such and such, and they sign at the bottom. If not, they're like, we regretfully inform you, such and such. You notice the difference? Let's take the credit. I accept you. We can't accept you, right? But in the service, it's different. We praise more the individual, and we criticize more if done on a group level. Or we criticize individually, not in front of the group. We encourage the person in front of the group, but we criticize the person secretly. Just like if you notice in the gospel tonight, was the gospel about the Lord Jesus Christ? I'm just, I didn't give you time to finish. I'm just walking on the water. Yes, and he allowed St. Peter to. And when did the Lord rebuke St. Peter for his faith? Before or after he got into the boat? Before, most likely, yes. Because then it's so I was thinking, yeah, maybe the disciples didn't hear this at the time. You don't know. Sometimes the rebuke has to be done in person, like in a group, if it's to a certain extent. Kind of like when the Lord said, "Get behind me, Satan." But oftentimes we criticize or we rebuke or we correct individually at first. Just like the gospel tells us, then we bring 2 or 3 witnesses, then we take matters more seriously, and they're not getting the message. And we praise the individual in front of the group first. And if that doesn't work, then we have to do it more on an individual basis. And the good leaders always do, regardless. Even if they go through the trials, they're still encouraging. Okay. This is the last point, evaluation. We can't form a vision or correct a vision if we don't evaluate where we are or what we have done. And the litmus test of the true leadership and discipleship is the followers themselves. So we don't just evaluate ourselves, it's very important. We also evaluate what's happening to those who we're leading. And we focus on their strengths, not their weaknesses. And even sometimes, I was telling someone today, what we might consider to be the greatest weakness might be transformed or in a different light considered our biggest strength. It all depends on how you look at it and how you apply it and where you apply it. So, like for example, if you're very short, don't think you will succeed in volleyball or basketball. Maybe you could be a jockey. And vice versa. Just an example. You don't see basketball players trying out to be jockeys. It doesn't make sense. So, by your talents and your gifts, your gifts are also a sign of where God needs you. Okay? So leadership capability is based on our willingness and ability to develop other people. So am I willing, first of all? The ability can be learned, just like Una said. But am I willing? If I'm not willing to develop other people, I'm not willing to be a good leader. One good quote, again, is, he says, the best test and difficult to administer is, do those served grow as persons? So this is how I analyze my service in my family, in the church, in the workplace. Are they growing? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servants? So maybe they're doing good, but are they going to become servants? Sometimes I always ask this when we're serving the youth. Okay, they're doing good, they're growing in the spiritual life, and I'm like, okay, we need you to be servant, and laugh. No, we're being serious. This is the plan for you that we had for you. The more people we have who become servants and remain servants, this is a good sign of the growth of the church and the future of the church. Just like Zoe said, but there's no church without future. Sorry, there's no future of the church without the future of the youth. Sorry. Someone help me. It's getting late. A church without youth, a church without future, and a youth without church is youth without future. We can say this about a church without. Can you say it again?
It was a church without youth, it was a church without future.
Yes, and vice versa.
Yes.
That's what.
Youth without church.
Yes. And we can say the same thing about the servants. So we can say a youth who doesn't have a servant is a youth without a future. And a youth who doesn't become a servant is also a youth without a future. Right? Servant in the real meaning, not by just Sunday school. Does that make sense? So we can say, forget youth, we can say a Christian who isn't served is a Christian without future. And we say a Christian who doesn't become a servant is also a Christian without a future. He said, in short, the enemy is strong in natural servants who have the potential to lead but do not lead, or who choose to follow a non-servant. They suffer, society suffers. So, of course, he was talking about natural servants and people who are trained to serve, different concepts. But you see, sometimes we have, or all of us have the potential to lead in different ways. But if we don't lead and we have the potential, like we were saying in the beginning, we will be judged. But not only that, we'll suffer, and society will suffer, and the church will suffer as well. Even worse, instead of being led by someone who's called to lead, they'll follow someone who's not even a real leader or a real servant. That would be even worse. So the last step of evaluation is, again, also evaluation itself. We ask, well, who have I followed in the past? A lot of times when they interview successful people, they're like, who was your mentor? What was your early life like? Who have you followed? So you think deeply, of course your parents, that's obvious, most likely. But who in your life have you emulated, and who did you feel that you really are a disciple of? I don't know, but it just seems like the list might be pretty short. And so is that true? To some extent? Why? I agree. For most people, it is pretty short, even in the church. But why is it short? Because there's no good leaders out there? I'm sure you have a lot very close to you. You need to think about it a little bit. For everyone, it might be a little different, but maybe it's just because we don't think it's as important as it really is. Like, because we're so busy, we have a lot of obligations, we don't have time to sit at someone's feet. But if we don't, we will suffer, society will suffer. So we need to take out that time and say, well, who am I following now? God. Yes, but we need a little bit. God is trying to help you more in your daily life by giving you someone to follow. How are you going to follow them? Of course, it depends on the person, the situation, but there has to be communication, there has to be interaction, there has to be follow-up, there has to be encouragement, all of these things. Then you, like we said in the beginning, well, who is following me? Not on Twitter. But, and what happened so far? How long have they been following me? Have they grown? Or has it been worse? Is it stagnant? Maybe I was encouraged in the very beginning. So a good example, like in the Sunday school class, as the years go by, so every year, okay, what did they learn from me this year? Or how have they, forget that, how have they grown this year? Have they overcome the obstacles that we anticipated, or even the ones they didn't? And so forth. So, to summarize, everyone is part leader and part follower. Always. The percentages differ, but we are all, even the greatest leaders are still followers to some extent. Even if the leader has passed away, we still are contemplating and learning from the example that they set. Just like we said, what would Jesus do? Sometimes, like for example, I would just imagine, if anyone of you has a strong spiritual guide, you say, what would Jesus do? Well, maybe it might be easier if I say, well, what if Abuna so-and-so, my brother of confession, what would they do in this situation? If they were in my place, what did they talk to me about? Not necessarily in their own life, but using their life as an example. Or my parents, or my grandmother, whoever the leader is. Any questions? Are we still doing questions today? Okay. We do, by the way, we do have a small break for you, so you can rest for the long events